My name is Tom Andrews, and I'm 65 years old. I've been married to my wife, Laura, for over 40 years, a lifetime, really. We met when we were teenagers, back in high school, and it didn't take long for us to realize that we were meant to be together. I still remember those early days like they were yesterday, sneaking off for stolen kisses, holding hands in the hallways, and dreaming about our future. When we got married at 18, folks said we were too young, that it wouldn't last. But we proved them wrong. Laura was my first kiss, my first love, my everything. And as far as I knew, I was hers too. We never had eyes for anyone else. We built our life together from the ground up, through college, through tough times, and through the joy of raising three amazing daughters, Madison, Ashley, and Emma. Life was never easy, but we made it work. I worked as a risk analyst, Laura became a gym teacher, and together we managed to raise our girls, keep food on the table, and stay strong as a couple. It wasn't always smooth sailing, but we always found a way back to each other. Laura was my rock, and I thought I was hers too. I believed we had it all figured out, until everything changed. You see, Laura has always been the more active one between us. Even now, at 65, she's in better shape than most people half her age. She's at the gym 5 days a week, still running marathons like she's 25. And though I noticed her spending more time out of the house lately, coming home late, sometimes distant, I didn't think much of it. I trusted her. We've been through too much together for me to suspect anything. But one evening, everything felt off. Laura wasn't acting like herself. She had that look on her face, the kind you get when you're about to say something you know will hurt. She sat me down at the kitchen table, and what she said next knocked the wind out of me. "Tom," she began, her voice shaky but determined, "I've been thinking for a while now. I need something different. I need to explore life beyond our marriage." I sat there, stunned. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to make sense of what she was saying. Explore life beyond our marriage? What the hell did that even mean? "I want to date other men," she continued, avoiding my eyes. "It's not that I don't love you anymore. I do. But I need to see what I've missed. Maybe for just 6 months, maybe longer. I don't know yet." At that moment, it felt like the world was crashing down around me. 40 years of trust, of love, of everything we built together, just gone. How could she ask me for this after all we've been through? My chest tightened, and I felt a sharp pain shooting down my left arm. I tried to speak, to ask her why, but the words wouldn't come. Suddenly, everything went dark. That evening, I sat down with each of my daughters separately. I made it clear I didn't want to discuss their mother, but I wanted them to know how grateful I was to see them. My eyes welled up with tears as I realized how close I came to never seeing them again. Sydney, the middle daughter, mentioned something interesting, as she said Debbie felt responsible for my heart attack. She didn't share many details, but it made me wonder what exactly she meant. I didn't press her about it. Terry and Darcy, my other 2 daughters, told me they were planning to take some time off work to help with my recovery. It was touching, but it also made me think about how complicated things had gotten. While Beth, the nurse, had to end their visit early, that conversation left me deep in thought about my next steps. Life would go on no matter what happened between Debbie and me. But did I even want to try fixing things? Could I live with her after everything? Sydney had hinted that Debbie was planning to explain everything soon, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. Infidelity doesn't just tear apart a couple, it shatters a whole family. I kept wondering if my daughters could help me make the right decision. If they knew what had caused my heart attack, their insight could be invaluable. The next morning, the doctors told me I'd be back to my normal routine in 6 months. Physically, at least. Emotionally, that was a different story. In those first 2 weeks at home, Debbie barely paid any attention to me. I couldn't help but think the girls had convinced her to give me some space, but I also wondered if she was using that time to meet other men. I didn't ask, though. Maybe I didn't want to know. At this point, I decided I needed to talk to my eldest daughter, Darcy. She'd always been close to her mother, and if anyone could shed light on Debbie's state of mind, it would be her. We sat down together in the kitchen, and I got straight to the point. Darcy, how long have you known that your mom wants to see other men? She hesitated before responding, but eventually, she admitted that Debbie had been thinking about it for a few months. My frustration bubbled up. So, she's been unhappy all this time, and I never noticed? I tried to stay calm, but the realization that I'd been so oblivious hurt more than I expected. How could you support her through this? Darcy shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. Dad, she just wants to experience something new. She's been devoted to the family her whole life. Maybe this is her way of finding herself again. I don't think it's about hurting you. Her words stung. Finding herself? I had been right there for the past 40 years. Still, I didn't argue any further. I needed to talk to Terry next. Terry was visibly upset the moment she walked into the room. Dad, how can she do this to us? She asked, shaking her head. This isn't just about you. She's betrayed our entire family. Her anger mirrored my own. She even suggested Debbie had started seeing other men before I was hospitalized. That idea nearly knocked the wind out of me. Could it really have been going on that long? Dad, you have to think about whether this marriage is even worth saving, Terry said. She wasn't wrong. I wasn't sure how much more I could take. If Debbie had been seeing other men for months, what was left of our relationship to salvage? I could feel the pieces of my old life crumbling around me, and the idea of moving on without her seemed more real with every passing day. After hearing what Darcy had just told me, my mind raced. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, knew about this? She had known for months, and I was completely in the dark. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath me. I looked at Darcy, her face full of remorse, but I couldn't even muster the energy to be angry at her. My rage was solely focused on one person, Debbie. Darcy, you telling me that your mother has been wanting to date other men for months, and you didn't think to tell me? Darcy shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her eyes avoiding mine. I didn't know what to say, Dad. She didn't want to hurt you. She said she was still figuring things out. Figuring things out? My voice rose, anger bubbling to the surface. Figuring what out? How to throw away 40 years of marriage? How to break her promises, her vows? Darcy winced, and I immediately regretted raising my voice. But the anger, how could I possibly contain it? She's just trying to find herself before it's too late, Dad. She says it's not about you, Darcy muttered, trying to make it sound like that somehow made it better. She doesn't want to hurt you. I shook my head in disbelief. Darcy, do you honestly think your mother exploring other men won't hurt me? How can you stand there and defend her? She's your mother, but I'm still your father. Doesn't that count for anything? Darcy's eyes filled with tears. It does, Dad. I swear it does. But Mom's, she's been lost for a while, and maybe this is just something she needs to do to feel whole again. I couldn't listen to any more of this. My own daughter was rationalizing her mother's betrayal. I had to get out of this room before I lost my mind. I gave Darcy a hug, a quick one, before sending her away. As I watched her leave, a thought crept into my mind that I'd never admit aloud. Maybe, just maybe, I wished she'd never get married. At least then she wouldn't have to deal with this kind of heartbreak. After Darcy left, my other daughter, Terry, burst through the door like a hurricane. Unlike her sister, Terry was furious, and she wasn't going to hold back. Dad, I cannot believe Mom is doing this to us. What is she thinking? I held up a hand to stop her. Terry, This isn't happening to us, it's happening to me. Dad, you know that's not true. When one person in the family screws up like this, it affects all of us. She was right, of course. Debbie's actions were like a grenade tossed into the middle of our family, shattering everything. But hearing Terry say that Debbie had already started seeing other men, while I was lying in a hospital bed, no less, was a blow I wasn't ready for. How long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Terry didn't hesitate. Since before your heart attack. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. The idea that my wife was sneaking around with other men while I was fighting for my life, it was too much. I couldn't breathe. My world, the one I had built over decades, was collapsing right in front of me, and I couldn't stop it. That night, as I lay in bed alone, I felt the weight of it all pressing down on my chest. How did I miss this? How did I become so blind to the woman I had loved for so long? We sat there around the kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared family dinners, celebrated birthdays, and built a life together. Now, it felt like a battleground. The silence was unbearable. Debbie was staring at her hands, eyes red from crying, while Madison, Ashley, and Sydney, her daughters, sat quietly, clearly torn between their parents. I finally spoke, breaking the heavy air. I've thought about this a lot, I said, my voice cracking slightly. And I need to apologize. For how I acted after the heart attack. I was angry, I was scared. I took it out on you, all of you. I glanced at my daughters, their faces full of worry, before turning back to Debbie. That wasn't fair. And I'm sorry. Debbie opened her mouth, her eyes searching mine, but I held up my hand, stopping her before she could say anything. Please, let me finish. I looked down for a moment, gathering my thoughts, then continued. The heart attack wasn't your fault, Deb. If anything, you probably saved my life by calling 911. But this is about more than what happened that night. I looked into her eyes, and I could see the guilt, the pain, but also the fear. I hated hurting her like this, but I knew I had to say it. We've spent over 40 years together, and somewhere along the way, we lost ourselves. I don't think either of us knows who we are without each other anymore. And when you asked for space, I realize now, it wasn't just about wanting to see other men. It was about needing to figure out who you are. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. Tom, I didn't want it to be like this. I never wanted us to fall apart. I know, I said quietly. Neither did I. But we can't pretend anymore. I can't. I need time, Deb, time to figure out who I am, outside of this marriage. And you need that too. She sobbed, and it took everything in me not to reach across the table and comfort her. But I couldn't. I had to stay strong. I'm not asking for a divorce, I said, feeling the weight of the words as I spoke them. But I can't stay here, living like this. We need space. We both do. The silence that followed was deafening. Debbie wiped her face with her hands, trying to calm herself down, but the pain in her eyes was clear. I can't do this without you, Tom, she whispered, her voice trembling. I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to fix things. I've been going to therapy. I haven't seen anyone since that conversation. Please, just give me another chance. I shook my head, feeling a lump in my throat. Deb, I've already forgiven you. But this isn't just about you. It's about me too. I need to be free of all of this. I need to be able to breathe again. I reached into my jacket and pulled out some papers, placing them on the table. I'm giving you the house, I said, sliding them toward her. You've built a home here, and it's only right you keep it. I'll take what's left, but the house, it's yours. She stared at the papers, her face twisting in shock. Tom, no. Please don't do this. We've been together so long. I don't know how to live without you. Her words cut deep, but I stood firm. Deb, I don't know how to live without you either. But we have to learn. I can't keep pretending we can go back to what we were. We need to move forward. The girl sat quietly, watching the scene unfold. Madison, our oldest, spoke up, her voice trembling. Dad, are you sure this is what you want? I nodded, even though it broke my heart. It's not what I want, Maddie. But it's what I need. I stood up, feeling the weight of the decision in every bone of my body. The chair scraped against the floor as I pushed it back. You'll have my email, Deb. I'm not disappearing. But I need to go. I turned and walked out the door, leaving behind everything I'd known for over 4 decades. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The months that followed were empty. I drove from town to town, parking the motorhome in random spots, trying to make sense of a life I wasn't sure how to live. The space I thought I needed didn't feel like freedom, it felt like I was drifting. Alone. Madison called often. At first, I didn't ask about Debbie. I wasn't ready to know. But eventually, it came out. Dad, Madison said one evening, her voice strained. Mom's not doing great. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What do you mean? She's been going out a lot, drinking more than usual, Madison said slowly, as if she didn't want to hurt me with the truth. And she's been flirting with younger guys. Even Jason. Jason. Her own son-in-law. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Dad, it's not like. I mean, it's not serious. But it's enough to make everyone uncomfortable. She's just lost. I stayed silent, trying to process what she was telling me. Debbie, the woman I had spent most of my life with, was unraveling, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. Madison, I said quietly, I'm sorry you're going through this. I never thought it would get this bad. None of us did, Dad, she said softly. But she's really struggling. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of the motorhome, the low hum of the engine the only sound. Debbie was spiraling, and I wasn't there to stop it. I had left, thinking it would help both of us, but now I didn't know what to think. But one thing was clear, I couldn't go back. I couldn't fix what was broken, no matter how much I wanted to. And that truth hit harder than anything else. A few months had passed since I left. I tried to embrace the idea of freedom, driving aimlessly, parking the motorhome wherever the road took me, but I wasn't free. The quiet nights brought nothing but thoughts of Debbie, of everything that had happened, and how badly it had all gone wrong. I kept in touch with the girls. They'd call me regularly to check in, and I'd do my best to sound upbeat, pretending that life on the road was exactly what I needed. But Madison, my oldest, could always tell something wasn't right. One evening, as I sat parked near a quiet lake, Madison called, and this time her voice was more urgent than usual. Dad, she started, sounding tense, we're worried about Mom. I straightened in my seat, instantly on edge. What's going on? She's been acting really off, Madison said, her voice shaky. Going out all the time, drinking too much. She's not herself anymore. I clenched the phone tighter. What do you mean, not herself? She's flirting with younger guys, Dad. Even Jason. I froze. Jason. Her own son-in-law? The words felt like a punch in the gut. She's lost, Dad. We've tried talking to her, but she won't listen. I don't think she knows how to handle any of this. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the situation settle in. Debbie, the woman I had spent over 40 years with, was spiraling. And I wasn't there to stop it. I don't know what to say, Madison, I finally replied, my voice tight. I never thought it would get this bad. We didn't either, she said softly. But we need you, Dad. We need you to come home and talk to her. She might listen to you." A long pause followed. Part of me wanted to rush back and fix things, to help Debbie and put everything back together. But I knew that wasn't possible. Too much had happened. Too much had changed. "All right," I said finally, feeling a knot in my stomach. "I'll come back." Pulling into the driveway of what used to be my home felt surreal. The house looked the same, but the life inside had completely unraveled. I hadn't seen Debbie in months, and I had no idea what to expect. When she opened the door, I barely recognized her. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes, once full of warmth, were hollow, tired. But she smiled when she saw me. "Tom," she breathed, as if she couldn't believe I was standing there. "Debbie," I said, nodding. "We need to talk." She stepped aside, letting me in. Walking into the house felt like stepping into the past, familiar, yet foreign. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt right. We sat down in the living room, and I could feel the tension in the air. Debbie was nervous, fidgeting with her hands. She didn't want to admit things had gotten this bad, but she knew. "I didn't expect you to leave like that, Tom," she started, her voice shaking. "When you left, I didn't know what to do. I've been a mess." I sighed, rubbing my hands over my face. "Deb, I didn't want to leave. But we were both drowning. I didn't see another way out." She wiped at her eyes, trying to keep herself together. "I thought I could handle it. But I'm lost without you. I don't know how to do this alone." "I'm lost too," I admitted, my voice low. But leaving was the only way I knew how to deal with everything. We were suffocating each other. Her face crumpled, and she wiped away a tear. "I've tried to fix things. I've been going to therapy. I haven't seen anyone since that night. I just don't know how to put myself back together." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. There was a part of me that wanted to take her hand, to tell her we could fix this, that we could find our way back to each other. But I knew deep down that wasn't possible. Too much had happened. We couldn't erase the damage. "I'm sorry, Deb," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I really am." She nodded, not saying anything, but the look in her eyes told me she understood. We both knew this was the end of the road for us. There was no going back to the life we once had. The days that followed were strange, like living in a fog. Debbie tried to keep herself together, but I could tell she was breaking inside. The girls were supportive, but even they knew there was no fixing what had been shattered. I stayed long enough to see things settle down, but eventually, I had to leave. The last time I saw Debbie, she was sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window. She didn't say much as I gathered my things, just watched me quietly. When I told her goodbye, she nodded, her eyes never leaving the view outside. I walked out of that house for the second time, knowing that this time, it was for good. There were no more second chances, no more maybe someday. We were done. It's been over a year since I left for the second time. A year since I walked out of the home Debbie and I built together, leaving behind the memories, the pain, and the love that once held us together. At first, I thought the road would give me peace, that time away would help me figure out who I was without her. But the truth is, I'm still figuring that out. The motorhome has become my life. I've seen more of the country than I ever thought I would, small towns, big cities, places I never even knew existed. And yet, no matter where I go, there's always something pulley. I keep in touch with the girls. They call me regularly, especially Madison. She's been the most understanding, always checking in, making sure I'm all right. But I can tell they are still hurting. Debbie's still a part of T. Madison called me last week with news. "Dad, Mom's not doing well," she said, her voice quiet. My She's changed, Madison continued, clearly struggling to find the right words. She's not the same person anymore. She's been acting out, drinking too much, dressing in ways that don't suit her. It's like she's trying to be someone she's not. I sighed, rubbing my ear. Madison hesitated before answering. They were, for a while. But lately, it's been worse. She's been flirting with guys half her age. She even tried to come on to Jason again. I felt a wave of anger and sadness wash over me. Jason was her son-in-law. It didn't make any sense. She's lonely, Dad, Madison said softly. I think she's scared of being alone. I didn't know what to say. What was there to say? I had left her. I wasn't there to help her, and now she was falling apart. I don't know what to do, Maddie, I admitted, my voice heavy with guilt. You don't have to fix everything, Dad, she replied. But maybe you could talk to her. She's still your wife, even if you're not together. I sat in silence for a long time, thinking about what Madison had said. Was Debbie still my wife? Technically, yes. But in reality, we had been living separate lives for over a year now. Could I even help her at this point? Or was I too late? I'll think about it, I finally said. But I can't make any promises. Madison sighed. I understand, Dad. Just, don't wait too long. The next few days were spent in a fog. I drove aimlessly, trying to shake the thought of Debbie out of my head, but no matter how far I went, she was always there. I kept thinking about what Madison had said, about how Debbie was struggling, how she was lonely. I didn't know what I could do to help her, but I knew I couldn't just sit around doing nothing. I eventually decided to call Debbie. It had been months since we'd spoken, and I wasn't sure how she would react to hearing from me. But I had to try. The phone rang several times before she picked up. Tom? Her voice sounded surprised, almost hesitant. Hey, Deb, I said, my voice softer than usual. I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I'm fine, she finally said, but I could tell from the sound of her voice that she wasn't. Madison told me you've been having a rough time lately, I said carefully, not wanting to push too hard. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Debbie let out a heavy sigh. I don't know how to do this, Tom. I don't know how to be without you. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. She was struggling just as much as I was, maybe even more. I didn't want it to be like this, Deb, I said quietly. But we were suffocating each other. We both needed space. I know, she whispered. But I feel so lost without you. I don't know who I am anymore. I swallowed hard, feeling a lump form in my throat. Neither do I, Deb. I'm still trying to figure it out too. There was a long silence between us. For a moment, I thought about suggesting we try to fix things, that maybe we could work it out. But I knew it wasn't that simple. We couldn't go back to what we were. Too much had happened. I'm sorry, Deb, I finally said, my voice thick with emotion. I really am. She didn't respond right away, and when she did, her voice was barely a whisper. Me too. The days after that conversation were strange. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had finally let go of something, but at the same time, it felt like I was still carrying a weight I couldn't put down. Debbie was struggling, and I knew I couldn't save her. But I also knew that leaving had been the right choice, for both of us. I kept driving, trying to find peace in the open road, but the truth is, peace is a lot harder to find than I thought it would be. Life doesn't get tied up neatly with a bow, and people don't just move on like nothing happened. Debbie and I had spent decades together, and that's not something you can just walk away from without scars. Maybe one day I'll figure it out. Maybe one day I'll find the peace I'm looking for. But for now, I keep driving. 1 mile at a time.